Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us. My name's Imani Rupert-Gordon, and I'm the Executive Director for Affinity Community Services. Affinity is a social justice organization, and we work with Black LGBTQ women, specifically on the South Side of Chicago. So before we get started and introduce our guest for today, I want to say thank you so much to Omari for helping us with phones today. Thank you so much. Remember, this is a call-in show, so if you have a question or if you have a comment or you're dying to hear yourself on television, call in. We'd love to hear from you. And now I'd like to introduce my guest today, Aisha Davis. Aisha is a lawyer who is currently serving as a fellow at Lovie & Lovie. Aisha attended Washington and Lee University in Virginia, and she went on to Columbia Law School and the University of London, SOSA, for her JD and LLM, respectively. As an avid student of intersectionality, Aisha has worked on civil rights issues throughout her legal career, including work with Amnesty International, the Human Rights Foundation, Columbia Law School Center for Intersectionality and Social Policy Studies, the African American Policy Forum, and Lambda Legal. Perhaps my favorite part of your bio is that Aisha has recently stepped on as a board member for Affinity Community Services, so now we all get to bask in your brilliance.
Thank you. I'm happy to be a part of the board. It's fun.
I'm so glad. Well, it is a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So I think folks might remember that this isn't your first time on the show.
Right, yeah.
And that's actually kind of why I was hoping you would come back. So on the last time we were here, it was actually just about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We were talking about the Olympics, and we were talking about specifically a meme that Ellen DeGeneres had created.
Yes.
But she wasn't as thoughtful about how intersectional issues work and how sort of this historical context and how race sort of played a role that she wasn't considering.
Right.
But it was a fun discussion because we talked about sort of pop culture things and how sort of this concept of intersectionality is woven throughout. And so I was kind of hoping we'd do a little bit of that tonight.
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah. So I'm interested specifically on the importance of LGBTQ representation in pop culture, specifically in celebrities, and more specifically in Black celebrities.
All right.
Yeah. So, so to jump right in, I think that we really have to start with Lena Waithe, who has been in the news just quite a bit lately, and she's really at the top of her game right now. She won an Emmy for she won the first Emmy as a Black woman comedy writer.
Yeah.
She has a show, The Chi, right now. That's doing really well.
Amazingly.
Yes.
Yeah.
She has a new show coming out, 20s, which is going to be amazing. And then she's on the next issue of Vanity Fair and looking pretty spectacular on it too.
Amazing cover.
Yes.
My favorite right now.
So she's doing she's doing things. But I guess wanted to talk about the importance of people being sort of outspoken about their LGBTQ identity in Hollywood. And, it's interesting for her because, she's spending a lot of time asking people to come out now and really leaning on her status and, her celebrity and asking people to do that. I'm wondering, what do you think about asking people to come out like that?
I've thought about this a little bit before, especially because I've been following all the things that she's doing right now, especially that cover.
Right.
But I'm torn. Like, at the end of the day, I'm very torn about it because I'm a firm believer in people coming out when they want to and making that decision and being able to be thoughtful about it and deciding for themselves. The idea of someone being prompted or kind of like gently pulled out of the closet, I mean, I understand where she's coming from, right? I can see both sides of it. On her side, I can see how having people be out, benefiting people who are younger, people who haven't come out yet, seeing themselves represented by people who are actively identifying as, family, pretty much. But then on the flip side, I do know how I felt about talking about my sexuality and knowing that I felt better because I had the chance to decide when and how to talk about it. Yeah. And I don't know how I would have felt if someone had been there, kind of like whispering in my ear or like nudging me to do something. Yeah. So while I think it's wonderful to have folks like Lena who are out, especially for young people who are questioning or just curious and, want to be able to identify with someone that they can see, I also don't know how I feel about having someone nudge you out of the closet. Right. So yeah, I feel like I'm still torn on that. At the end of the day, though, I think it's a very personal decision that is, I love the idea of consent. So you should always be the person to determine when and how that would happen.
Right, right. No, I hear you. I completely hear you, and I'm in the same boat. And I also would love to see more LGBTQ celebrities
Absolutely.
running around. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing that we could punctuate parts of our lives by
Absolutely.
these celebrity couples that we could see,
Yeah, definitely. Especially if it's one that you feel like you can identify with a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, growing up, and it was funny, we just mentioned Ellen, but growing up, I don't remember hearing that much about people who were out, right? The people who I heard about were like Ellen or some gay men who were out, but no one who I felt like I could really identify with, right?
Right.
Now we have more people who I could identify with, but I think if I were 15-year-old Aisha and seeing Lena Waithe talk about this so openly, it would have made a difference, definitely.
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm also wondering, so is it fair for us to ask people to come out? And then what are we really asking them? An article I just, no, this was a video I'd seen. Lena was like, I mean, again, she's at the top of her game
She
right
is.
now,
She absolutely
and she was like, I came out and people love me. I want young people to see that people like us are dope,
Absolutely.
But she's like, people love me. How do you think that people would respond if other celebrities, LGBTQ celebrities, started coming out, especially LGBTQ celebrities of color, And then I'm also curious, Lena Waithe is incredibly talented,
Absolutely.
And what if the people coming out were not as talented as her?
Absolutely,
Do you think
yeah.
that would play a role? And yeah, is it still true that you can't be really openly LGBTQ in Hollywood for the majority of folks?
I think it's a multi-layered thing, right? Like the way you pointed out also just is indicative of that. So you have people who are extremely talented and who really are charismatic and bring people in. People like Lena, right?
Yeah.
She's very much someone who I think has lived in her truth, whether it's personally, like when she's doing these interviews, when she's on these videos, even when I don't know what award show it was, but she was presenting and she was talking about this too. So it's like something that's very upfront about her, like very to the front. Even in the episode of Master of None that she won the Emmy for, it's sometimes I talk about it like Lena is playing Lena. It's a black lesbian person playing a black lesbian person on TV.
Just like her.
Which is great, right? And like similar style and everything. Like as far as I don't know her personally, but it's exciting to see that. But you're right. She's extremely talented. If this were someone who wasn't as talented, it could be considered a hindrance. And I can definitely understand, especially if it's if we're talking about a woman who is trying to appeal to the masses, right? A lot of times you have to play into one idea or the other. And if you are out, it could shape the way people think about you. Similarly for men, if you have a black man who's coming out as gay and he's not at the top of his game, it's difficult, and you might end up being pigeonholed because that's just how it seems to work. I mean, it's already hard enough for black celebrities to find, especially I'm thinking specifically about black actors and actresses. Yeah. It's very hard to find roles that are outside of the norm, It's not until this year where we've seen movies like Black Panther that are making $1 billion, and it's amazing and it's wonderful. And I remember just recently I saw another advertisement for another movie and I was like, this feels so different now. It feels extremely different for me to see this ad after having watched Black Panther, because this is a movie that is more, quote unquote, like in line with the ideas of what black movies are, what black cinema is, right? And seeing that after seeing Black Panther is like, okay, these are options. Like these are different roles that we can play versus this is what we have.
Right.
So I think that there is a concern that people might have in coming out because they will be put into this category of, oh, this person's gay. Like they play gay all the time. They have to be, or they have to play bi, or they have to, it just turns into a whole thing. And for some people like Lena, where you're extremely talented, it works.
Yeah.
But if you weren't that talented or you're not that charismatic, I really don't know. It could end up being a hindrance to your future. So
yeah,
it's a real question, and there might be a cost to it.
I know. So, I think even for those of us that have had a fairly supportive coming out experience, that we recognize that there's a risk coming out, and so. Even for those of us who had to think about it, we know that by and large people are that the people that love us are gonna continue loving us. But we do have to preface ourselves or make ourselves okay with the fact that there might be someone that won't quite won't quite accept us for who are. Like, I mean, you know,
Right.
even though they already have us enough.
Right.
Like, oh, you know. But that headspace you're in, there's a cost there, you know, and kind of with that said, I want to make a bit of a transition, which you're probably gonna see right through. I want to hear your thoughts about Janelle Monáe.
Absolutely. Oh man.
Her song, Make Me Feel, has been considered this bisexual's anthem.
Yes.
Is what I've read. And in the video, if you haven't seen it, she's in the video, she's sort of bouncing back and forth between this man and this woman in her video. The gender not conforming folks in the video. It's a really like fun, like sexy video, you know, and really queer too.
Yeah.
And there have been rumors about Janelle Monáe being queer, but to be very clear, she has never said anything like that.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, when people ask her point blank, she'll say something like, you know, it benefits me for women to think I love women, you know, and it benefits me for men to think that I love men. And so I just let that go because for me, it's just selling album sales, and that's what I have to think about. And so I'm wondering, I mean, and, you know, maybe even saying that is actually saying enough, you know.
Right.
I mean, maybe that's saying something too. But I'm wondering how you think Janelle Monáe, how she shows up in this larger discussion that we're having. And then, if I can say it like this, how her lack of talking about her own sexual orientation, how that makes you feel. Do you like that?
That was smooth. I like that one. I've always been a fan of Janelle Monáe. She's amazing. Another extremely talented Black woman, right? And I have noticed in her interviews, both in videos and in print, she does this very coy thing where she doesn't really admit or deny. And a lot of times, you're right. Like, I wonder if it's an admission by omission, you know? And I personally love that she kind of like tap dances on this line of like, maybe I am and maybe I'm not. And I think that it has really benefited her because part of it is that she has this entire like sci-fi narrative around her albums that I personally love. And you had this storyline of an android, and you know, you had these undertones of social justice. You have all of these different things in all of her music, and I absolutely love hearing it. And then I also like how she kind of toys with that in her stylistic choices in her personal life, and in her interviews. Like, I think there was one interview she had a while back where she said, you know, I'm an android. And when somebody asked her about her sexuality, she's like, I'm an android, you know, so it doesn't really matter about men or women. And so that kind of playing with the story, I think is, I don't know, I think it's brilliant, to be honest. And I think it's an alternate way of us being in the spotlight, right? Like, you can have someone who is very upfront and forthright about how they identify, right? You have Lena, who is very outspoken, and it's wonderful, and we need that. But I think we also have space, and a lot of space, actually, for people who aren't playing this, you know, very straight story about it. Like, it's a kind of like a teasing situation, and you know, people are allowed to read into it however they want to. She's had lyrics that have alluded to things. She has this video now that's alluding to things, and while a lot of people are very much like, oh, this is confirmation, this is it, we still don't have it. You know what I mean? We still don't have her actually saying anything. I think it's a very good strategy, both for selling records and also for growing a fan base, because she's absolutely right. There are people who love her music even more because they can find themselves in the lyrics. They can see themselves in videos. And so keeping that broad audience and kind of playing that role, I think it's wonderful. I also think it's interesting because she's doing what straight people always do. You don't have to talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, you don't ask, most people don't ask straight celebrities things. They just assume it. And unless you're coming out, you're assumed straight. Unless you're like Janelle, who's like teasing in the lyrics. So it's, I think it's very cool. I love it.
Yeah.
I hope that she continues along. I hope she puts more videos out, like Make Me Feel. It's wonderful.
It was lovely.
It's a great, great video.
Yeah, I just recently learned how to play it on guitar.
Wow.
Which was pretty fun.
I know. That should be the next episode.
As we play a little Janelle Monáe. So, kind of going off with what you're saying. So, Lena is super clear about who she is, and you know, in an interview she said, you know, I don't know how to be anything but Black and queer, you know, and that's where she is. And I also read something where she was deemed a butch heartthrob.
Yes.
Which I'd never heard before, but
Accurate.
It's super fitting.
Accurate.
Yeah. And there's all this talk about, lots of people talking about, like, how cute she looks in sweatpants, like, you know, her aesthetic and who she is, it's incredibly prominent. And so I'm wondering, maybe sort of the differences. I don't want to say if it's harder either way, but when you're when you're a femme queer woman, it might be different coming out. You know, if the someone might not, or you might be in situations where you have to come more often because people might assume ways in ways that you might not. If, like for instance, I can't imagine you've ever been deemed a butch heartthrob.
I have I've never been called that. I'll open though.
Okay. But you haven't yet. You haven't yet. So since you're not, that might be something that you, that would come up, that would come up for you. And so, I guess I'm just wondering, thinking about femme invisibility, how do you think that plays into sort of this larger conversation about coming out?
Absolutely. I think that it's really interesting because we just talked about how Janelle does this like dance along this line. I don't think that a lot of the more androgynous or masculine center women who are queer identified can do that tap dance. Unless they're willing to alter their presentation or, do things that would make them a little more, I guess, not assumed. It would involve kind of doing what Janelle has done, which is stay this androgynous femme leaning, presentation. And I think that it's interesting. Like, I don't know if there's anyone who ever looked at Lena Waithe in any role that I've seen her in and been like, maybe, it's pretty much up front in her roles and the things that she's done. Whereas with Janelle, it's like a is she, isn't she? And that has happened to me. It's interesting because you're right. People can look at someone and assume things about them, whether they're right or wrong. These are the assumptions that they make, right? A lot of times I've been in conversations with people and they'll say things and not realize that they might be talking about me. And so it's always funny to have the opportunity to really take that moment to educate and talk about things if I want to, or just kind of play the back role if I don't. And it does afford me a little bit of a benefit in that regard. But at the same time, it does mean that I have to have this conversation over and over and over again. And it can be exhausting. Like sometimes I wonder if I could just buy a shirt that and wear it everywhere and not have to ever worry about it again. But I don't know how I would feel if I were in Janelle's shoes, and you have to constantly either talk about or allude to, or, it's a very difficult thing. And you're right, there is a level of invisibility, and that invisibility can cut both ways, whether it's for the good in terms of record sales or for the bad in terms of having interviewers berate you about certain things in your life. So I think it happens a lot to a lot of different people, especially people who are femme-identified women.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that there are also benefits of, like being femme-identified, that it comes up. There are ways that we experience privilege too.
Absolutely.
And so want to name that, because I think that's something important. But
definitely.
But there's another side too, and that's the part that we're concentrating on for this particular conversation.
That's a whole other conversation.
Exactly. Just want to make sure. We know.
Can't do both in 30 minutes, but we're acknowledging and naming it.
Exactly. So I also want to ask you about what you think, sort of this larger call to ask people, come out wherever you are. How does that, what are we asking people that identify as bisexual to do? And I'm thinking about this in particular because I read an article about Cynthia Nixon.
Yes.
Do you remember from?
Miranda.
Yes. Miranda from Sex and the City. Yeah. She is running for governor in New York.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. So there's that.
Very exciting.
But it's really interesting because she started dating a woman and now is married to this woman. I think fairly soon after Sex and the City ended. And so many people would say, she found out that she was a lesbian later in life. And it's something that it's been 15 years now. And so she's been thinking, and it's something that actually causes her a great deal of frustration.
Yes.
Because she is not a lesbian. She's bisexual.
Right.
And she says, I was with a man for 15 years and loved him, lusted for him, and now I'm with a woman. Loved her, lust her,
Yeah.
And so, both of those things should be able to be true.
Exactly.
And so wondering, when we're saying, come out, it's, like the water's warm.
Exactly.
Is the water warm for like bisexual
is it?
folks?
You're right. That's a good question.
Because, so what if this song is a bisexual anthem? And what if Janelle wants to come out as bisexual? are we doing a disservice by encouraging folks to come out when she has a really cool thing going on right now where people are they're asking her what her sexual orientation is, and she might be in a situation where then people would be telling her what her sexual orientation is.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, just wondering, this sort of bi erasure, how do you think that like kind of
it's everywhere. It's interesting, right? Because I have a lot of bi-identified friends and people who identify as queer and also bi, and it's real. It's a very real erasure situation, but also like a biphobia situation, because sometimes it shows up as people, like lesbian women telling me, oh, you know, if I had known you were bi, I would have thought differently, or like men thinking that it's a entree into something else, right? It's not a comfortable place to be in those conversations. And I think that when you're asking someone to come out and identify as bi, it also puts a lot of pressure on them in terms of their relationships. So you have people like Cynthia Nixon, who has been married, you know, and has had these wonderful, beautiful relationships with both men and women. And just by the fact of those relationships, people should understand that she's bisexual, right? But people really do want to put her in like one or the other, and don't really recognize the fact that she is bisexual regardless. Like regardless of who she's standing next to. Right. It's the same way that you have people who are either like lesbian or gay and have married a partner of the opposite sex and eventually divorce them because, you know, they have been gay or a lesbian the whole time. Like that marriage didn't make them straight, the same way that these relationships don't make someone a lesbian or straight, or a gay man and straight. So it's really hard to ask someone to come out and then have them know that they're going to be challenged constantly about their relationship. So like in addition to Cynthia Nixon, I always think about Anna Paquin, who is married to, and I can't remember his name, but we'll call him Bill Compton because that was his name on True Blood. But I remember vividly watching this interview with her, and the person questioning her, the interviewer, was like, oh, well, you know, you've said you're bisexual, but now you're married to a man, and so, you know, does that mean you're not bi anymore? And she's like, no, actually, it just means that I'm married to a man. I'm committed to my husband. That doesn't change who I am. And it's a thing that has to constantly be reaffirmed and reasserted. And I think that asking someone to come out as bi is different than asking someone to come out as either like gay or lesbian or straight. It's just, it involves a whole nother level of conversations where your identity might be invalidated repeatedly just because of who you brought to an award show or who you took a selfie with. It's just, it's a lot. And it can be exhausting. So I don't think I would ever ask someone to like jump into that without considering the repercussions that might happen because of it. So
I hear you. So we are almost out of time here. But last thing, and I didn't talk to you about this.
Oh, let's go.
Is there any LGBTQ person that you were aware of when you were young that when you saw them or heard their music or whatever, you really felt seen?
You know, I don't know if I ever felt seen that much, because I think a lot of the people that I could think of off the top of my head are either like Ellen or like RuPaul, you know? And where I can identify like as a woman with Ellen and as a black person with RuPaul, it's just not, it's not the same as like having someone like Lena be out and like talking about these things. So I think that's extremely important, like to have this identity, like have someone that you can identify with a little bit, even though our sexualities may be different. It's easier to see, like to see yourself in someone. It matters so much. I remember Robin Roberts coming out and that being a huge thing. And I think she came out after like a health issue or something. And I remember talking to my mother about it, and my mom was like, you know, I never knew, you know, and she's wonderful. And it was one of those conversations where I'm like, okay, you're very accepting and loving and warm about this, and it makes you wonder, would that have been the same reaction if she had been out the whole time? Or are you like warm on her because you already like loved her as an anchor, and then you found out and it's like, oh, that doesn't matter, you know? I wonder about that too, because I feel like Ellen had a similar story where it was like people loved her and then she came out. There was a backlash, of course, but having that endearing personality and being charismatic already and setting that foundation versus someone who's like coming out front, very open about it from the start. I think it's interesting, and I'm excited for the future. I'm excited that there are going to be young black girls now who feel the ability to identify with Lena and see someone like that. So that's wonderful.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, I feel really great about this. I mean, I will say that I feel so lucky to live in a time where we have artists like Janelle Monáe. I really love seeing her videos. I love hearing. I love being able to watch this, and of course love Lena Waithe and celebrities that that have come out, because it's hard. It's hard, and
Absolutely.
we appreciate it. It's just such a pleasure. Thanks for being
Always
here.
happy to be here.
Yeah.
That's always fun. It's exciting.
Thank you so much. We are here the fourth Friday from 6:30 to 7. Thank you so much. We're Affinity Community Services. You can find us at affinity95.org. Thanks so much. See you next time.